Hello, this is Mr. Thaxton at Paisley IB Magnet in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Today I'm going to review first and second declension nouns and adjectives, and then introduce to you some exceptions from the first declension. They are masculine. As you know, first declension nouns like femina are feminine. Another word that we've learned before is lingua, language or tongue, and casa, house. When we modify first declension adjectives, they usually take the same endings. For example, femina irata, the angry woman, or lingua latina, the Latin language. And then finally, casa alba. In all of these examples, the ending of the adjective is identical with the ending of the noun. And then in the second declension, kibos, food, which we're familiar with. It's a second declension, masculine noun. And sokios, also second declension, masculine. And we know it's masculine because it ends with US, and the genitive ending is long I in both cases. And then the last example I have is praesidium, guard or protection. And we know it's a second declension neuter because of the um ending and the genitive long I. And of course, as we would expect, when they're modified by an adjective, we get identical endings. Kibos, jucundus, the delicious food, or socios magnus, the large ally or comrade. And praesidium barbarum, the foreign or barbarian guard. But what I want to talk to you today about is the exceptions. They're first declension masculine nouns like poeta, and in this case we have the expression poeta claris, which means the famous poet. Now, what we would expect here is poeta clara or poetus clarus, but that's not the case. Neither of these are correct. We don't have poeta clara or poetus clarus. The correct expression of this is poeta claris. These are the first declension masculine exceptions. So there's a number of other ones. Nauta, which we've seen before, which means sailor. Agricola, farmer. Pirata, so it's a good one. There's some that we haven't learned before, which are really interesting, like grammatista, which is masculine as well, and it's a teacher of grammar or of languages. That's me. Coprea, a low-class buffoon, masculine as well, and umbraticola, I particularly like this one, a lounger in the shade, or in other words, a lazybones. So what happens with these first declension masculine nouns? They're feminine in form, but they're actually masculine. So when they're modified in an expression like poeta claris, we don't get poeta clara. What we express is poeta claris with these endings. And so you have a masculine adjective ending because the noun poeta is actually masculine. And what you would expect in the genitive would be poeta, poetae clarae, but that's not what we see actually. It's poetae and then clari, the masculine genitive singular ending. In the dative, which is the giving case, the indirect object case, we have poetae, the feminine dative singular ending, combined with claro, so poetae claro, not poetae clarae. In the accusative or the direct object, there's poeton, which we would expect, the m ending, which I talk about frequently, in the accusative singular, the nasal sound, poeton, which you should be looking for, combined with clarum, not claram, poeton, clarum. And then in the ablative singular, the adverbial case, it's long a, poeta claro, not poeta clara. All right, in the plural, in the nominative singular, excuse me, in the nominative plural, we have something similar, poetae clari, and in the genitive plural, poetarum clarorum, not clararum. In the dative plural, poetis claris. Now these forms don't deviate. They're the same as with the first declension because the endings are the same in both the first and second declension. So we don't see any surprises here. And in the accusative plural, poetas claros. And then in the ablative, just like with the dative plural, poetis claris. So, poeta claros in context, in sentences. In the nominative, it would be used like this. Poeta claros, the famous poet, wrote an epic poem. Or, poeta claros, excuse me, and in Latin, poeta claros epos scripsit. In the genitive, in English, if I insert this in the sentence, you can either say poetae clari, name, was Homer. The poet's name, we would say in English, or the famous poet's name was Homer. Or alternatively, if you translate it with of, you would flip the nouns around and to say the name poetae clari was Homer. The name of the poet, of the famous poet, was Homer. Or in Latin, nomen poetae clari Homer erat. In the dative, the indirect object case, it would be used this way. I sent poetae claro a letter. I sent the famous poet a letter. And in Latin, misi poetae claro litteras. In the accusative, the direct object, we read poetam clarum long, long ago. In other words, we read the famous poet a long time ago. In Latin, iam pridem poetam clarum legimus. And then in the ablative, when the Iliad was written, a poeta claro. The Iliad was written by the famous poet. In Latin, Ilias a poeta claro scripsitor. So I hope this has been useful. I'll have questions for you at the start of class when we meet next time. Okay, thank you very much.